Hi there, and welcome back to this channel if you have been here before, or welcome if you are new. I'm Sándor, and I'm here to talk about my eating disorder recovery and anything else that's related to the topic. Just a quick disclaimer, I'm not a medical professional or a therapist. I only talk about my recovery because I believe it can be helpful to hear that other people went through the same stuff you are going through and they came out the other end. Keep in mind that these are just my opinions and experiences. Nothing I say is meant to be prescriptive. Some of the things that work for me could work for you as well, but recovery takes some experimentation, and you need to be in charge of that. Today I will talk about how I knew I was fully recovered from my eating disorder and what fully recovered even means to me. So I guess I should start with, how I initially thought about recovery and what the end goal was for you if you were recovering from an eating disorder. When I started to recover from my eating disorder, I was still living in Eastern Europe, where there was basically zero awareness about eating disorders. Hardly anyone talked about them online, and I certainly never heard anyone mention the possibility of being fully recovered. I was in therapy for a while for my eating disorder, and I don't even recall my therapist mentioning that full recovery was possible, even though she was someone who dealt with an eating disorder in the past. I don't think that the topic of full recovery ever came up during these therapy sessions, so initially I kind of settled for a life, recovering to a life where I could manage my eating disorder symptoms and keep them in check or in remission. Initially, when I started to recover, the idea of, recovering to a life where I can manage my symptoms was fine with me because I put in a lot of work, but I saw that I was making good progress, so I didn't mind putting in the effort. But after experiencing a couple of relapses and slips and, experiencing a plateau in recovery, I kind of reconsidered how I felt about the amount of work I had to put in and the progress I was making. The prospect of having to put in all of this work for the rest of my life just to keep my eating disorder symptoms at bay wasn't appealing to me anymore. And I kind of felt like doing all this work didn't leave me enough time or any time to participate in my life, participate in the things that I was recovering for. I guess we could say that I experienced sort of a recovery burnout, but eventually I came across people online who talked about the possibility of being fully recovered, even though I was pretty skeptical and cynical about that initially. I didn't just dismiss the possibility of being fully recovered. I was actually convinced that all these people claiming to be fully recovered were probably delusional, lying to themselves or lying to me. I don't know why exactly was I suspicious of these people, but I was kind of convinced that maybe they are trying to sell me something that supposedly would help me recover, or, I just convinced myself that all these people have something to gain from claiming that and telling me that they are fully recovered. Over time, I realized that this was a pretty limiting belief, and if I didn't believe that full recovery was possible for me, I would never recover fully. This belief of mine would become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I continued with my recovery, trying to keep an open mind about the possibility to recover fully. And that was a weird journey because as soon as I decided to believe that full recovery was in the cards for me, I kind of put that expectation on myself to recover fully and do so by a certain deadline. And I started obsessing over this, and I started scrutinizing and second-guessing every single decision I made around food and exercise because I wanted to make sure that every single decision came from a healthy place. That level of vigilance was also really exhausting and unsustainable. Eventually, I realized that as long as all my thoughts revolved around recovery and I was fixated on second-guessing every single decision I made, I wouldn't even be able to tell if I was recovered fully. I wasn't even, engaging with my life normally or properly, if that makes any sense. I wasn't really living my life or giving my healthy self a chance to take the steering wheel and see what happens if I let go of this level of hypervigilance. So that is what I did. I gave myself a break, so to speak, from second guessing and overthinking, and I started living my life trusting that what I had learned in my recovery would keep me recovered and would take me to fully recovered. I even stopped talking about my experiences with eating disorders because I felt like just talking about them will keep my focus on them. I kind of felt like that I will need to walk away from this if I wanted to, give myself a chance to fully recover, take off the training wheels and wait and see if my patterns begin to change. Walking away from it didn't mean that I stopped practicing self-care or I stopped having a healthy self-care routine, but it meant that my intention behind this self-care routine changed. I no longer viewed these healthy self-care practices as a way to keep my eating disorder symptoms at bay. I engaged in self-care because it felt good and, it improved my quality of life. And that's what you're supposed to do anyways. And a couple of years went by, and every now and then I got a bit introspective and looked back at where I was with my recovery and in life just in general. And every time I did this sort of introspection and looked back at my progress, I had to realize that, maybe 6 months ago I was still doing things or having thoughts that were coming from a slightly disordered place. But now that had changed. And after a while, this turned into me getting introspective and looking back at my progress and realizing that, I have more freedom around food and exercise, let's say, than I had 6 months ago. And, I don't think what I was doing, let's say 6 months ago was coming from a disordered place, but my relationship with food, exercise, and my body had still improved. I think this is exactly this gradual and transitional nature of recovery into a recovered life is why it is hard to tell when your recovery process stops, because there is always room, I guess, to improve your relationship with yourself. But just because there is work to be done, that doesn't mean that's eating disorder related. And that doesn't mean you still have an eating disorder. And this is why you can't exactly pinpoint a specific date and say you consider yourself recovered from that day. Recovery is a gradual process without a visible finish line. No one is going to wait you for there with a bottle of champagne. It's more like you will realize one day that you can't remember the last time you had eating disorder thoughts or you engaged in an eating disorder behavior. And the real test of recovery, I think, is when life flings some shit at you and you still cope with it without resorting to your eating disorder thoughts and behaviors. Being fully recovered won't give you plot armor. It's not going to make you invincible, but it will give you a tool set that will help you navigate your life, basically. There is no universally accepted definition or criteria of what being fully recovered means. And, there is no laboratory test that would tell you if you still had an eating disorder, and they can just simply scan your brain to prove that you no longer have eating disorder thoughts, even though there is actual brain scan data showing that people with an eating disorder have different brain activity in certain regions, certain areas of their brain, compared to healthy individuals. Just because your brain activity would return to normal, that doesn't prove you no longer have eating disorder thoughts or you no longer engage in eating disorder behaviors. Anyway, that was a tangent, and what I was trying to say was Carolyn Costin actually coined a definition of being fully recovered that really resonates with me. And this definition basically states that being fully recovered means accepting your natural body size and shape and having a healthy and intuitive relationship with food and exercise. When you are fully recovered from an eating disorder, you are no longer willing to compromise your health or, betray your soul to achieve a particular look or clothing size or weight. And being fully recovered also means that you no longer use eating disorder behaviors to manage or distract from other issues in your life. Even though this definition resonates with me, as I said, it's still somewhat vague. So let me give you some real life examples from my life to illustrate how I know for certain that I'm recovered fully. We moved to a new country 3 years ago where we didn't know anyone, and to do this, to move to this new country, we sold everything we owned, and when we arrived, I didn't have a job. and I had to find one and start working in a foreign language, which I've never done before. You know, since Brexit happened, the UK is not that welcoming of immigrants. Even simple things such as opening a bank account was pretty complicated. Or, for example, we didn't have a rental history, so finding a place to rent was also quite stressful and difficult. And eventually we bought and renovated a house, and again, finding a place to buy and getting a mortgage if you are on a visa was not stress-free. I also experienced burnout in my previous job, and I decided to quit, which shows that I didn't really take good care of myself because I let that happen, but eventually I was able to remove myself from that situation. You know, the point is there have been a lot of changes for me over the last 3 years, and I was able to handle them without resorting to eating disorder thoughts or behaviors. And because of all these things that happened during the last 3 years, there were times when I didn't exercise at all, and not exercising for prolonged periods of time in the past would have made me really anxious, but that didn't happen this time. Another thing that has shown me over the last couple of years that I'm recovered fully is the fact that I have to take thyroid medication on the daily because my thyroid is basically non-functional. And this medication affects your metabolism and can cause weight loss, especially if you overdose on it. And I did that in the past, intentionally overdosing myself soon after I started taking this medication, and that was something that induced a relapse for me. You know, starting my day by taking a medication that affects my metabolism and can cause weight loss was messing with my head so bad initially. My eating disorder self was just so fixated on the possibility of weight loss that I had to constantly fight the urge to take more of this medication than I should have. And as I said, there was a period when I couldn't fight that urge, and I intentionally overdosed myself with this medicine, which led to a relapse. Today, that's all in the past. I can take this medication every morning without even thinking about it. You know, it's part of my daily routine, just like taking a vitamin C pill. Okay, so I guess the takeaway here is that I had to remain open to the possibility to recover fully in order to get there. And recovery isn't about becoming immune to the challenges that you will face in your life, because yes, you can recover fully, but that doesn't give you plot armor, and you will still face challenges and difficulties in your life. It's just you have become more adept to deal with those challenges without ever having to go back to your eating disorder. I guess that's all I had to say. I hope you will have a great day, or at least a reasonable one, if you are going through something difficult.